I have a request. The next one just has to be a montage of Anakin's signature behind the back lightsaber spinning.
Oh,
just
funny.
over and over and over again.
The whole theme. Yep. Sure. You got it.
Skytalker, presented by Bounding into Comics.
Man, we don't deserve Cider here at Bounding into Comics, who makes these intros. I just say in an offhand remark, I would love the next intro to be all of Anakin's backspins with his lightsaber, and the guy does it. Just absolutely wonderful. I hope you got a good Christmas card from the Bounding into Comics team, Cider. You deserve it. All right, tonight on Skytalker, we are back. Me and my bronchitis will be hacking our way through a hack job, if you will. The Star Wars sequel trilogy from Disney, 2015 to 2018? Was when the last one came out, The Rise of Skywalker. This will be fun. We're going to have a full panel show tonight, just talking about these movies, sort of revisiting the trauma and, some of the stuff that worked. I like to try to find stuff that I don't hate in Star Wars, so that I can survive until the next day, something to give me just a little bit of glimmer of hope. And I think we're gonna have a pretty well-rounded discussion. Over on Bounding into Comics, you will find my latest column. It's titled "Disney Star Wars Sequels Were Doomed from the Start," and they were. It asks a question, which I think we're going to try to get into tonight, which was, why did Star Wars, the most iconic story in modern history, and I mean that when I say it, get treated by Disney like a last-minute hack job from start to finish? And it was laid out, again by another member of the cast, this time Adam Driver, when he was doing some interviews here just a couple of weeks ago for his newest movie. And he was talking about Kylo Ren's arc, and that Kylo Ren was originally going to be, at the start of when they started working on the Disney trilogy, was going to be an opposite of Darth Vader's arc. He was going to mirror it in the other direction, meaning Darth Vader starts off really, really bad, committed to the dark side, and he gets softer and softer all the way to the Return of the Jedi and his redemption. And Kylo Ren was going to do the opposite. He was going to harden. So you kind of have that beginning of The Force Awakens where he, is saying to Darth Vader's ashes or bones or helmet or whatever, like he's drawn to the light, that he's tempted to go back. So he has to kill his father and go deeper and darker. And then he kills Snoke, deeper and darker, I guess. And then he just he kind of goes back and forth, waffling with that journey until in the end, he just does a hard switch. Now, I also wrote a different piece years ago for The Federalist, where I laid out that I hoped that Kylo Ren could get a redemption. And he ended up getting one, but I'm sort of left struck and confused by the way in which it was done. It felt like it was a last minute decision, because it was a last minute decision, according to Adam Driver, according to Daisy Ridley. And they all share the kind of same experience that John Boyega, who played Finn, FN2187, has described, and that their character arcs were not fleshed out. They were completely put together with duct tape throughout the entire process of making those movies. George Lucas did this as well. He was making certain elements of Star Wars up as he went. The Skywalker twins, Darth Vader's connection to Luke Skywalker, that kind of stuff. Really, the Skywalker family connections were the stuff that were the biggest moving ball throughout the production of the early movies. But the thing is that George Lucas had a vision. He had something he wanted to say in these movies called Star Wars, and he said them. He had something to say about the world, about redemption, about hope, about friendship. And you could see like nothing really changed in the trajectory of those movies. They also look the same as one another. They feel the same. They feel like they are part of one trilogy. And that is not the story of the sequel trilogy, which we will get into tonight. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the panel. So let's bring them out in whatever order. We are joined tonight by Grayson Quay of the Daily Caller. We are going to also be joined by Remso of here at the Bounding Into Comics and Bounding Into Sports team, and my bud Riley Blanton, formerly of the Star Wars Report, and my co-chairman over at geekystoics.com. So guys, who's ready to talk about the sequels? Let's I don't even know where to begin. Some of you have done a rewatch this week. Grayson, you didn't make it all the way through.
Not quite. No, I ran out of time. Had to take the wife out for a nice dinner, and honey, I need to finish watching the worst movie I've ever seen. Wasn't a good enough excuse to get out of the day.
Yeah, we had another guy from Bounding, Matt Battaglia, one of the new columnists here, who it was like his wedding anniversary or something, and he didn't, want to like sit back down and watch one of these movies and then join us tonight, which kind of gay, but whatever.
That was funny. My wife and I actually saw The Last Jedi together in theaters, and I remember us, talking about what we liked and what we weren't sure about on the drive home and having this really engaging conversation. And then 2 years later, we went and saw Rise of Skywalker, and the credits rolled, and she looked at me and said, "Well, what did you think?" And I just said, "Terrible." And we just walked out. Didn't say another word about the movie.
Yeah. Well, just to set the table here for what we're going to do, let's go in like chronological order. Let's just kind of work our way through these movies. This is an open format, like just chatter and interrupt each other and do your thing. Everybody here is probably like trained to be too polite doing live streams and media hits and all that stuff. So drink more wine, Riley, and
I'm listen, this is my preparation. Everyone else actually watched the movies. This is all I've done so far.
So let's just like begin with emotion. If you could take the Star Wars sequel trilogy, the Disney trilogy, and we keep them or we go back in time and it never happens, which one would you do?
Go back in time, prevent the whole sale from happening. I mean, there are enough points of the last decade and a half where we've gotten some really awesome stuff. The first couple seasons of The Mandalorian, we got to finally close off the Clone Wars, which is a series that was in animation hell for many years after Disney acquired Lucasfilm, and then it got yanked away from Cartoon Network and got thrown on Disney Plus. So there have been some moments where it's like, dang, they actually really get it right. Most of the time it's been television. Some of the times it's been in books. It's almost never been an issue in comics. Marvel editorial has really had a really good understanding of like what fans want. I've been reading the Star Wars comics since Marvel got the licensing rights due to the sale to Disney, and the comics I have nothing to complain of. The High Republic stuff is a completely different story. I haven't touched that with a 50-yard stick. But if I could go ahead and put on like my Thanos gauntlet and just snap my fingers and make one thing happen, I would rather just remember what was happening. As with the prequels, there was some good, there was some bad, but everyone was universally like, okay, like we can live with this being it, versus what it's become. It's become such a cesspool of toxicity from people defending this at all costs, sometimes conceding what's wrong, but then it just, Star Wars isn't fun anymore. That's the thing. To talk about it, it isn't fun anymore. And it always comes back to the sequel trilogy. This is what did it. This is what put the nail in the coffin for it.
A bad
and the conversations can't happen. Yeah.
Grayson, would you smash or pass the entire thing? Does it get kept and we just like work around it, or do you just start over again?
I think
What's your
I don't
wish?
think I'd go as far as Remso. I think we undo the sequel trilogy. I don't know that I want to undo the whole sale. I do enjoy I enjoyed the first few seasons of The Mandalorian. I enjoyed Andor quite a bit. Although, I'm not sure how it is weird to me that Andor and Star Wars Rebels like theoretically exist in the same universe now, and like having characters crossover feels odd to me. But yeah, I just think there was a way to handle it that could have been done differently and done better. Because now I feel bad that some of the IP that they've come up with that I do like Andor and The Mandalorian, is now going to, as its plot line progresses, inevitably run into this just absolute nonsense. Just this hash that they made of the sequel.
Because like I was when we were watching The Force Awakens back last night, and I'll go ahead and show my hand on this one. So like The Force Awakens, my wife and my young daughter both saw that I was going to be putting this movie, and they both wanted to come in, hop on the couch, like popcorn, and watch it. My daughter, namely, like this was actually the first Star Wars movie she ever saw in theaters. She was 4. Very special memory. Like it's a good one for us.
So that set the tone.
Yeah, and that was the starting place. She wanted to come watch it. She's like, yeah, let's do it. We haven't actually watched this in a couple of years because we've been watching the prequels a lot. And we went through that movie. It was a fun time. We were laughing, making fun of the weird stuff like you do with Star Wars, and kind of enjoying some of the more cheeky and warm moments. But when it got to the Starkiller base, right, and the blowing up of the New Republic, I leaned over and I was like, that's like all the characters, that they're working on right now in this kind of Rebels, universe, this Thrawn universe that they're going to be building. Everything going on in the New Republic, the Mandalorian stuff, right? Like the Chandrila and the New Republic, the bureaucrats and the paper pushers who won't sign the paperwork and all that kind of stuff. Like they just killed all those people in 2015. And you're kind of now like working and snaking around that in a way that is just, you go, oh, this sucks. This sucks.
This is another example of like the trilogy we could have gotten, where like it would have been somewhat interesting to have the political situation where you had the First Order and the New Republic who are like nominally at peace, but the New Republic is, it's an open secret that they're funding this subversive movement within First Order space, and that this is exacerbating tensions between these two interplanetary states and leading inevitably towards some kind of major confrontation. But no, they just swept all of that off the board immediately in the first film.
What was the book that talked about like how the government was forming as the New Republic has actually like defeated the Empire and everything? I think it's canon.
Yeah, there's a couple, if you acknowledge the new canon. So there's the Aftermath trilogy. And Riley, I think Riley, you're better read on these than I am. The Aftermath trilogy, but then primarily Bloodlines by
I think that's
that was the one I was thinking about.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. I haven't read any of the new novels because I just love the old ones so much. And it's so frustrating to me to see them bring Thrawn into like Star Wars Rebels, where it's like, he's this military genius. No one
he's
can
not a cartoon.
Except this dumbass 13-year-old kid who just bumbles his way into every situation and comes out on top every time.
Man, at least they still made Thrawn feel like the Saddam Hussein of the Star Wars universe. Like this dude who is just like so into what he's doing. Like there is no moral compass. There is nothing. Like that was the one thing where it's like between the cartoon and when they bring it back in Ahsoka, I was like, I feel like they get it sometimes. And then they intentionally are just like, but we're going to do something crazy over here. And that's where I lose focus.
Yeah. And Riley, I want to get your take, just like your overall. Would you keep it? Would you keep it, or would you relegate it to the dustbin if you could? Magic wand.
Yeah, 100% keep it.
The sequels.
Yeah, I'll be that guy. 100% keep it. But here's why. I think what the thing when you told me the topic tonight, I was just like, man, what on earth do you even say that hasn't been said? And I think honestly, that's when we talk about what sort of broke Star Wars fandom and the franchise in general, I think it's much more important to analyze the discourse around the films than the actual films themselves. So here's like my quick take on the Disney acquisition. I think Star Wars was, and I remember because I was podcasting Star Wars Report at the time, it was essentially dying. I was at Celebration 5 and 6 when like the highlight of the franchise was going to be Seth Green's new animated comedy show. I don't even remember what it was called. And then like Clone Wars, which was fading, but that was like the only thing carrying the franchise. So it's needed rejuvenation. But the problem with the films is I think much more about the execution and planning, and much less about the what I would call, and I'd be really curious on your take on this, Stephen, the NPC tendency when we talk about these films, because it's sort of like everyone goes into robot mode of loud defense, or like everything sucks. And then there's the laundry list that we've all heard 5,000 times about why everything sucks. And I think there's not really enough analysis of the specific elements that I think needed to be there. There are these beats and these character arcs with the characters we love that I think are very important to the overall story. But man, it was a fail in the execution. That's just my perspective.
Okay, I think that's good to know kind of where you stand on this, so we can go forward. So let's start with the Force Awakens, and let's confine our discussion as best we can right now to that movie, and then we'll let everything fall apart when we get to The Last Jedi. Because when you talk about like the NPC engagement and fan, the fan engagement aspect of Star Wars, my memory of the world in 2015, 2016.
What a time, by the way, to be alive.
It was general excitement. I think that there was always an element of fear of like a Disney takeover of Star Wars, and there was bad blood from the beginning. When they scrapped the EU and started calling it Legends. So there was immediately some of that rumbling underneath the surface. But it feels to me like most people were going in with good faith, and we're like, all right, Star Wars is back, baby. We thought it died in 2005, but no more. And everyone was having a good time. But there was immediately the review of Star Wars The Force Awakens was a repeat of Star Wars A New Hope, like beat for beat, scene for scene. And I think that's very that holds up. But it started the new run off in such a unobjectionable way, except for what we're looking at on screen.
Perfect timing.
Cider's just like nerfing me as unobjectionable way. Han falling off.
Yeah, but and this is where, and I'll say this and I'll shut up. But this is where we fall into that trap. When I say NPC, I mean the sort of like just falling into the trap of talking points that have since developed around the movie. When The Force Awakens first came out, I mean, it was a few weeks of pure bliss as it rocketed to the top of the charts, and it was like Star Wars is back, baby. And I honestly didn't hear it's just a carbon copy of A New Hope take really proliferate until The Last Jedi. I certainly heard it, but it wasn't like the take. And I think that's like this thing we're looking at right now is the mentor dying. But the difference between The Force Awakens and A New Hope, and this is what I always say when people bring up this criticism, is that it essentially is, with one very important exception, which is it inverts the Joseph Campbell hero's journey mentor figure from the wizened Jedi, which is what we have in A New Hope, to the like trying to figure out how on earth to be the Obi-Wan role for Han Solo, which I think is an interesting arc for him, because if you just have him be Han Solo again, I don't think that works. And I think the execution paired with, and again, this is about execution, not idea. The idea of Han playing the role that whose sacrifice saves his son in the end, that's a really good story. The way it was executed, I think, is where we can have fruitful discussion and go beyond the kind of typical talking points, I guess.
Something also to consider that I just want to add. I mean, you brought up something which is really worth noting, Riley, which is they had a lot of goodwill going into this.
Oh, sure.
You go ahead and counter that with what had happened with the MCU. So Iron Man is just Marvel Studios. That's their one film where they did it entirely with a B-listed, property that Fox didn't want, that Sony didn't want. They went all out on an actor nobody wanted to touch, Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man succeeds. Universal Studios still has the Incredible Hulk and the Edward Norton Incredible Hulk film. While, critically it did fine, audiences weren't a big fan of it. It was still like its own thing. It's not until Captain America: The First Avenger people are looking at it as like, this is the first real like Disney-ish Marvel movie. Jon Favreau was still attached to Iron Man 2. That was a mixed bag. Captain America: The First Avenger did not do great financially. So it's not until the Avengers comes out in 2012 that people are looking at this. They're like, wow, Disney really let Marvel Studios know what they needed to do to keep people happy. And you can throw all the the director of He Who Will Not Be Named out there. But, that movie is really what was like, okay, Marvel is here. Disney knows what they're doing with letting these studios do their thing. Why would they not do that with Lucasfilm? And with this, I mean, I agree. With The Force Awakens, the one thing that I will say it failed to do, which is what A New Hope did, was that it was not a good standalone movie. You're left at the end of The Force Awakens with a lot of questions. I had hesitations about Rey being a Mary Sue character, but I felt like they didn't really explore that a lot. There was a lot of setup there. I felt like with them instantly killing Han, it's like this is too much of a parallel with Obi-Wan, but without any of the optimism that goes towards the end of the film when Luke eventually blows up the Death Star. That isn't there.
Yeah,
So,
because like Riley said, like the purpose of Han's death is an inverted Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon death, where instead of the death of the mentor catapulting the Padawan towards being a knight, right, and being a Jedi and standing on their own 2 feet, the death of Han is to catapult the villain, which I will say it, I think is, I don't hate it. Like I like that, and it doesn't matter what actors think about stuff. Like I don't care what Mark Hamill thinks about Star Wars. I don't care what Harrison Ford thinks about Star Wars. But I always do remember, like, Harrison Ford really wanted to die in Return of the Jedi. He really wanted to die in Return of the Jedi. George Lucas wouldn't let him do it because it wouldn't sell action figures. And he wanted to go out because that, I guess to him seemed like emotional stakes for his character. And I just remember, like, my daughter, again, I'm always will talk about this in the context of being a parent, but my kid really loves Han Solo, and that's actually not a reflection of me. I really like Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi. I don't like run around like cheering about Han all the time, but my little girl loved Han a lot, and I saw what was happening on the catwalk with these two coming together, and I was like, oh no. Like, am I gonna have to cover this child's eyes? Yeah. I knew it was about to happen.
No railings.
Yeah, there's no railings. This is the Obi-Wan scenario. And in terms of like murdering a legacy character and throwing them off a balcony, I think what I like about this scene and the way that is done, Riley, you and I have talked about this a lot, is that there is this ambiguity about the intention, like the handing of the lightsaber, the holding it, will you help me, like, and I was like, what? Like, does Han know what is about to happen? Is Kylo uncertain about what he's gonna do? And for me, that, like, those layers really work. Where you lose me is chucking this guy's body off of a ramp and Han not having a freaking grave and no funeral. Like,
well, I remember there was a fan theory at the time that Han triggered the lightsaber himself. And the thank you was like, thank you for sparing me the necessity of doing this. That like, right. Han knew that if his son killed him, there would be no going back for him. Mm-hmm. But that if he were to do it to himself, it would spare his son from doing it and might, keep him.
Remso's offended.
Yeah.
I'm trying to piece that together.
I thought it was a very interesting theory at the time, but
Grayson,
nothing came of it, just like nothing comes of anything in the sequel trilogy.
Well, kind of, but Grayson, I think what you're pointing out there is it kind of matches JJ's intention when he tried to do.
Yeah, it kind of struck me as this, like, like one of the like suicides from like a Martin McDonagh movie or something, where you always have a character who like kills himself in some way, but it like ends up having a redemptive effect on the other characters. I guess I was thinking along those lines.
Yeah, because even in The Last Jedi, and oh, I broke my rule already and moved this forward. But you know, in The Last Jedi, like Snoke says to Kylo, like the deed broke you in two, like killing your father. Kylo Ren says, "I killed Han Solo, like I did the thing, which was supposed to be to bring you closer to the dark," and it broke him in two, which kind of goes back to, did Han know what was happening? I think he did. I think he knew that this would break his weak soy boy son who's trying to cosplay the bad guy, and it worked. Like,
I can be a Sith Lord too, Dad.
Yeah,
I honestly really loved that aspect of Kylo Ren when I first saw this movie, that like, you know, Darth Vader is just like cold, and if you don't meet your quota, he'll just choke you to death in the middle of a briefing room without like showing any emotion, whereas Kylo Ren will just like throw a full temper tantrum and like pull out his lightsaber and like just start slashing up random equipment or something. And, you know, the fact that one thing I noticed in my rewatch is that Hux and the other officers like don't actually treat him with very much respect. Like whenever he'll give an order, they always will question it or at least like echo it.
Yeah, he's a fraud. Yeah, he's a fraud. Yeah, no one takes him seriously.
The boss's grandson.
I like that about him because it made him like more volatile and almost like more dangerous in a way that you just didn't know what he was going to do, and he was just such a like brat, you know.
We've broken Steven.
Sorry, I have lingering bronchitis from the holidays, and so I'm just going to be like having these.
Okay, fits. General Grievous. All right. So.
I miss
fine
that
addition to my collection.
I miss that SNL skit that came out. I think it was the SNL Christmas special around the 2015 when Kylo Ren enters Undercover Boss. And he's like eating lunch at the stormtroopers. He's like, "I hear Kylo Ren is ripped. I hear Kylo Ren has an 8-pack." And they're like, "Man, he's lame."
Yeah.
It's like, that was one of those moments where it's like they get the humor. They get what they're doing sometimes.
You remember in The Last Jedi when they do the mind bridge thing and he's shirtless, but his pants come up like almost to his nipples.
High-waisted.
I just witnessed that.
One of the surreal moments of the entire trilogy. It's like, what was going on in the costume department?
And she asked him to like put a blanket on, put a cowl on, and cover up. And then Kylo Ren doesn't respond. He just continues to stand there and deadpan at her. You will look at my body. And then I think she, you know, again, another sexual awakening, and in this weird ass trilogy. So, God,
we're talking about Han. This is a dumb cheap shot, real quick, but I love that Han and Chewie have been traveling together for 40 years, and Han just now is realizing how Chewie's bowcaster works, and has never fired it before.
There's another, so that's a really freaking weird moment, and there's another weird moment that I don't think anybody will fully appreciate until you watch it again. But there's this horribly edited scene. Actually, the whole battle on Maz Kanata's planet is just like a freak show of weird cuts when Han, Chewbacca are taken captive by the First Order, and then all of a sudden, that's when the Resistance is flying in. But Finn is going to fight the weird twirly stick man.
Traitor!
Traitor meme. And Maz Kanata hands him the lightsaber. He goes, "I need a weapon." And Maz Kanata goes, "You have one." And she hands him the lightsaber, holds it up.
Unless I missed something, he was holding a blaster rifle like 10 seconds before that.
And Finn takes it, and then he holds it. And he stares at it for like 5 seconds while Maz Kanata's below him going like this, like an NPC in a video game. And it's like a cut scene where the character gives you the weapon, and then the game is loading into combat mode, and then it swings around Finn into third person, and you enter the game. It's so strange, and I don't freaking understand. Like, who edited that part together?
You have just spawned
that scene right after where they've been captured, and like then the X-wings come by and like a few lasers hit, and it hits exactly all the stormtroopers next to them, and none of them.
That's one hell of a pilot.
That is.
Yeah, it's one hell of a pilot.
The stormtroopers, they order in airstrikes like 3 times throughout the movie. They try fighting, and then they give up and like, airstrike. Come on,
Yeah,
let's do it.
That's some solid joint tactical air control right there.
So all right, how do we feel about Rey? Because someone in the comments mentioned Harrison Ford died to awaken feminism. I will say, I will say that what I hate in Han Solo's death is that Rey is up on the balcony, like watching as if she's part of this. She's not. You're not part of this. Like the dire consequence and stakes of this moment. I know that Luke knew Obi-Wan for like 24 hours as well, and she's known Han for like 24 hours, but this isn't about you. And I just, every time it cuts to her going, no, I'm just like, please go away so we can deal with this moment.
The feminism is pretty insufferable almost immediately. Like when they're running away on Jakku, she says like no fewer than 3 times, like, stop holding my hand. I can run on my own without you holding my hand.
Oh, we get it. Yeah, so brave.
Falcon, and then the minute she gets on the Falcon with Han, she starts like explaining how to fix his ship.
She bypassed the compressor.
He's owned for 40 years better than he knows how to.
Yeah.
Despite I thought for like the first half of the film that she had autism or something. Because she like doesn't talk, and I'm like, is she just being a bitch, or like does she not want to talk to these people? And then she just like suddenly figures things out, and I'm like, oh, like is she just really smart, or is she like
I was texting Grayson. I was texting Grayson just a little bit ago and was like watching The Last Jedi. I was like, the dialogue for Rey, she is just this weird British autist. I don't understand why she says the things that she says. There's this line that she has where she's trying to convince Luke to come back and help the Resistance, and she goes, Kylo Ren is strong in the dark side of the Force. We need you. I was like, what? Like it's like a kid playing Star Wars in their backyard, and they're like, coming up with the lines and all that stuff. And that's exactly what it feels like. Is a lot of the characters, Rey, I think most of all, it's like she is a traveler passing through Star Wars wearing a costume. And it's very rare moments where I find it believable that she's actually part of this.
Yeah, the new Dungeons and Dragons movie did this part very well, in which they had all the cast being all the figures, all the characters that you would typically have if you played Dungeons and Dragons, but like they had personality. So like I can't see myself as Chris Pine, but Chris Pine is also Chris Pine throughout the film. So it's like you're allowing the audience to be part in one of the characters, but the characters still have enough personality to make it through. Grayson, I couldn't name one line that Rey said throughout this entire movie. So the fact that you remember that one line from her shows that you watched it more than I did.
Let go of my hand.
I don't remember. I just remember her screaming. And then every once in a while, John Boyega is like, Rey! That's the only line I know he has in the entire trilogy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it felt like it was written for third graders. But yeah, I mean, this is
another, so I'm jumping ahead again, but another thing I noticed was, and this like felt almost like it was like a reshoot scene, or it was something they wrote in at the last minute, but like at the very end of The Last Jedi, when Rey gets back and rescues everyone and they get on the Falcon to leave, she and Poe Dameron run into each other and he goes, "Hi, I'm Poe." And she's like, "I'm Rey." And I'm like, oh my God, we're 2 movies into this trilogy. And the screenwriters just forgot to have these 2 characters meet.
And so I think that's actually like a good beat. I want to touch on like lightsaber battle and then move on to The Last Jedi. But I think that is one of the things that goes on in these movies that continues to be broken, which is bringing in the new generation of characters. If you're going to bring in a new generation, commit and do it, right? Like make us love the trio of Finn, Poe, Rey, whomever, to sell freaking action figures, inspire kids, make people love them. But they never really fully commit to that. They're constantly going back and forth between, the legacy characters, the new characters. Let's kill and unceremoniously murder the legacy characters and then take time away from building up the new ones. And then they just don't. They don't build up Poe. They don't build up Finn. And, you know, Rey just kind of coasts along through these movies trying to find her identity. And it just, you get to the end of the trilogy, which is, this is what our, you know, the article on Bounding into Comics is about, which is that, you know, you get to the end and you go, what was the point of all of this? There was no message. There was no idea here, a thing that Disney wanted to say with these movies. I think you can make the case that each movie says individual things.
Yeah.
I think there's a good message in The Force Awakens. There's a worthwhile message in The Last Jedi. There is literally nothing going on in The Rise of Skywalker except for, you know, choosing your legacy and breaking with your family history. Like that's it. But they're not connected. They're not one cohesive movie. Fun matter. I like lightsaber battles. Let's hash this out. The woods on Starkiller Base. Is it good or bad?
It's one of my favorite parts of the movie, I think, actually. I like Kylo Ren's lightsaber being like, I think the way they explained it in canon was like that it was poorly made. Like they didn't align the crystals properly or something, which is why it's like crackling around the edges and everything. Yeah. But the sound was really cool. The way they did the sound design, the lighting was cool. There were some moments where they clashed and there was like a blue-red flicker across their faces. I liked the lightsabers hitting trees and hissing in the snow.
Yeah, you and I are aligned on this.
That Rey's just like swinging, that they're just kind of swinging wildly at each other as one of them is very inexperienced and the other one's very badly wounded.
The sound design is a really good point.
Lightsaber battle, actually.
Yeah, I actually, so the sound design bit is the thing that really like kind of actually wows me when I watch this. It's particularly when Finn is fighting Kylo in the very beginning. There's no music, and it's just that loud, just deadly whooshing, and it's pretty cool. And you sort of get that raw intensity of that fight. But again, it's like the kids playing Star Wars in the backyard thing. It's that there is hardly any choreography. It's just wild swinging, which I don't hate. I actually think it's pretty cool. Riley, Remso, what do you think?
Man, I hate this chick. She should not have been going toe to toe with this Disney princess who's been doing this for at least 10 minutes. That was the thing that bothered me. Like I can suspend disbelief that she suddenly figured out how to fly the Millennium Falcon, but the fact that she is going into armed combat with, you know, a self-proclaimed Sith Lord. I remember watching this. I'm like, she's just Rain Man.
He's a Knight of Ren, you asshole.
She just
whatever that is.
You have to read the spin-off comics, kids.
We don't talk about the Knights of Ren, okay?
He's not a Sith Lord. You have to read the comics.
But this is the whole like idea with the bowcaster, though. That's like they spent so many freaking time saying the bowcaster. It's a pretty big deal. It's gonna really hurt when it finally hits our Sith pretender in the shoulder. And I think that's the reasoning behind it. But I get it, Remso, because I think they're both so unpracticed. It certainly doesn't have any of the weightiness of the duels in the original trilogy, or obviously the awesomeness that was Nick Gillard's choreography for the prequels.
I mean, unless we get rose-colored glasses, the duel in A New Hope is a snooze.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
You can't win, Darth.
It wasn't supposed to be crazy, though. It was supposed to be two samurai coming together for that. But, like, you know, you compare, like, Duel of Fate.
Those were not samurai moves. Those were not samurai moves, Remso.
Are we gonna fixate on that?
To stop every 2 or 3 swings and
retirees
pop some more
with their canes.
Put on to stop every
You have the handicap guy with the geriatric. They're trying their best.
Hold on, let me put on an icy hot. Time out. You know?
I have my depends on, Doth. Come at me. But like, I mean, this is when I look at this is Napoleon Dynamite getting into a fight with a chick who won't go to prom with him. Like, it just like you go from Duel of Fates to this. Like, I like the scenery. I like old samurai movies. You know, Castle of Blood, Redbeard, and stuff like that. And like I like the juxtaposition. I like the lighting. That's something I've always liked about James Cameron stuff. Like cinematically, he makes things look really cool. It's just that when you actually like observe the two of them, it's just like, God, just somebody die.
Yeah. No, and I just this is like just a pure like fanboy perspective here, but like the place where I want to fight to the death in a lightsaber battle. I think every good Star Wars fan like has like their dream of like where they're gonna fight. I want to fight in the snow. That's where I want to have my battle, in a snowy field or a snowy woods. And so when they actually did this in this movie, I was like, it's my battle. Let's do it. I don't want to fight on a lava planet. That does not sound fun. No.
It's very sweaty.
Hey,
Yeah.
backing up, but remember in the Millennium Falcon chase scene when they first get the Millennium Falcon, where they like hit the handbrake or whatever and flip it over frontwards so that Finn can shoot the TIE fighter behind them, even though the laser cannon can just pivot and shoot backwards.
Yeah. No, we always have to do
Jams.
something to up
Jams.
the ante and wow people.
I remember I
And
didn't
Fast and
notice
Furious,
how
whatever
crazy
was
it
coming out that year, they had to compete.
Yeah, it's just, and that's one of the things that it kind of erodes certain elements of this trilogy, is that there is the constant trying to find a thing that hasn't been done before. And when you are prioritizing searching for a thing that hasn't been done before, you get very, very overeager to throw out the things that have worked. This is like progressivism, conservatism 101. And I think that's a good segue to the Last Jedi. The Last Jedi challenging the things that have worked, having a discourse within itself about the legacy of the Jedi and therefore the legacy of Star Wars. It's very meta. So what I'm going to say about the Last Jedi is that I don't like it. It's boring. It's a snooze. I find the multiple plot lines to be tiresome. Like you can handle multiple plot lines in a movie and multiple different character actions, but I didn't stay with it. I was not having fun watching
you
all
weren't a fan
of these
of Rose
different threads.
Tico?
No, I was not. Oh my God.
I will say,
Were you
I
not
actually
petitioning for her to get her own spin-off after this?
But so what I want to say is that I don't like this movie. I think it's out of 11 Star Wars feature films, it's down like around 8 or 9 for me. But the thing about The Last Jedi is that what people often say, it's nicely shot. Like it's a very lovely movie. The problem is that it's a Rian Johnson looking movie in the middle of two J.J. Abrams sugar rush Star Wars movies that kind of like have prequel energy. And it's jarring. You don't feel like you're watching the same set of movies. And I find that to be one of the big sins. Just aesthetically, everything about it, it's just wrong. It doesn't look right.
You know, if anyone's written a book that like goes into the decision making behind giving this movie to Rian Johnson and giving him like
I'd like to read it. I'd like to read a book on this.
Screenplay and then giving it back. Yeah, like, or is this just still a black box? Because I would be fascinated to read this.
See,
this is why we have journalists.
Yeah, well, because all the key players still work in Hollywood, and unlike the world of politics, nobody blabs. So instead of getting a tell-all about the 7th tell-all about the Trump administration, there's been total secrecy on the behind the scenes of the sequel trilogy, which blows my mind, but it's true.
Yeah, no, and I think actually I love
someday,
that.
I'm sure.
I love that point though, because I want to know about like the Game of Thrones that goes on with their director battles and the Colin Trevorrow script and all that crap. Like I really want to know how this crap plays out and get the details. But where to begin with this movie? So it starts off with the Resistance on the run. We get the weird kind of like bombing in space sequence. It just starts out kind of like a basic war movie, and then Poe Dameron getting sanctioned by, oh God, no, the nipples.
There it is. Look at it. Look at it.
Look at it.
God,
he's a
Why is
demon.
he breathing heavy?
They're staring into my soul.
This is like I feel like
he can't
my
see you.
headcanon here is that it's like the Ron Burgundy scene where he's like sitting there with the weight in his hand, just waiting for her to walk past. It's like, I don't know if you were listening, but I did over 1,000. Sorry, I'm all sweaty from my Sith workout.
It's White Goodman in Dodgeball. Oh, you see me reading a book. I love reading.
All right. So, does anybody want to fall on the sword in the beginning and have the contrarian point of view on Jake Skywalker, aka Luke Skywalker, in Episode 8? Because again, people on this live stream, everything that has been said about this, or that can be said about this, has been said. All right. So let's have a different conversation.
All they were missing was giving him a sex change.
I like the. I'll do it. I like the portrayal of Luke in this movie. Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Grayson Quay
yeah.
of the Daily Caller, conservative Catholic journalist, likes Jake Skywalker. All right,
this is a soundbite. Be careful.
All right, give us your Spark Notes take on that.
So I think that the idea of him becoming jaded is not necessarily outside the realm of possibility. Like, I don't know. I think it's one of those things where you have the critique of like, oh, he wouldn't just run away to an island, and it's like, well, I mean, Yoda did that at Dagobah, so it's like there is precedent for this. I don't know. I thought it was funny when he milked the giant thing and then like took a drink of it and winced.
So let's talk about that, because like Riley mentioned talking points, and so like this is one of those things that comes up as a symbol. People hearken to Luke guzzling the milk as a symbol of his, being emasculated or like knocked down and nerfed, and so he's drinking from the native creatures, and therefore feminism or something like. Why is this a thing that people latched onto as the symbol of Luke Skywalker's fall? The fact that he is eating to survive on this planet.
I think there's a perhaps Freudian interpretation of him regressing, returning to the teat, as it were.
It just dripping down his scraggle beard,
and it's like the swig, like where the guy later in the movie goes like salt or something. He's just like, yep. He's like, here we are. Yep.
One thing I like about the way Luke is portrayed in this, and it's kind of a general note about the film as a whole, but it's something I liked about Rogue One a lot too, is that it's kind of the most religious of the Star Wars films, where you get the portrayal of the Force and the Jedi that emphasizes their status as a religion, that it's not just like a superpower that lets you do cool flippy flips and mind control people. That you find out in this movie that there's like Jedi religious texts even. And I thought that was a really cool angle that they went with. And I love the shot where Rey is doing lightsaber drills and Luke sees her in the distance and like a tear runs down his face. And I was just thinking, I don't know, like what if, if you're I don't know, the thing that came to mind with that is like, if you're a Catholic and the church has collapsed, like the Vatican's been sold off as a museum, and all the monasteries are closed, all the parishes have been knocked down, and you're just by yourself, doing the liturgy of the hours, and you think you're going to be the last one, and you have a very deeply problematic or deeply complicated view of the church's legacy, but you still have some real love for this religion, and then someone shows up and you kind of see her praying the rosary in the morning or something, and like that's kind of how I felt like Luke felt in that moment, is just like, oh, it doesn't have to be over, it's still there somehow.
That was very charming, Grayson.
Thank you.
I thought you were gonna say it was like the Book of Mormon.
My heart just
Wars,
grew
okay.
3 sizes.
Riley,
do you want to talk to us about narratives here? Because
let's
know you've
do
got
it.
something to say.
Well, so here's Grayson. I'm totally going to jump in on what you were saying, because here's the thing with Luke in The Last Jedi, and let's get ready for my favorite word when it comes to Star Wars discourse. Let's have some nuance, because execution fail. But no, execution fail objectively. But I think the story beat, Grayson, as you were saying, the idea of a jaded Luke Skywalker, or really what it is, it's a crisis of faith. I don't think I'm able to rebuild the Jedi Order because I tried and failed. The crime is what happens off screen. All of that buildup, all of that trauma is contained in 2 flashback scenes, which is, by the way, and not discussed nearly enough, 2 different perspectives, points of view of the same flashback
Yeah, it's
You have
scratch and
Kylo's and Luke's, and you don't know which one's real, so it's confusing to the audience. So that really crucial motivating moment of why Luke Skywalker had this crisis of faith is so much more vague than Yoda's in Revenge of the Sith. Yoda's like, failed I have. He failed to defeat the Emperor and knew it was his time. It was no longer his time. He must abide on Dagobah. And you just don't have that. So the idea of a Luke Skywalker who has a crisis of faith, and by the way, a full arc, because people don't talk enough about the what Rian Johnson's intent for the final character, which is he comes back and saves the day. He saves the rebellion. He comes back in the weird ghosty fight scene, and the whole idea is that he sacrifices himself to preserve not only the resistance, aka the rebellion, but also the future of the Jedi Order. I will not be the last Jedi. There you go. There's your title in the script. Like, those are all ideas that I think really work in the world of Star Wars. But there was too much time there was too much green milk and not enough like really leaning it, because Star Wars doesn't need to be subtle, and so much is omitted from the idea of that story arc that what you're left with is that the abundance of screen time is Luke's bitterness, and it renders the final scene where he confronts Kylo, and where he finally, sees Leia for the last time. It deprives that of the significance it should have had. That's like my short take on Luke Skywalker and the Last Jedi. There you go.
I've got a question.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll ask Riley this. Do you think if you eliminated the subplot of Rose and the casino planet and all that random stuff, do you think if we had just focused on Luke, there would have been more, I don't know, more apologism for his arc throughout this film?
Oh, 100%. Because remember, he told Rey he had 3 lessons, and that was going to be an arc of 3 moments of hesitation, and then thinking about, maybe I should train this girl, and then finally embracing her and starting the training. And they left out the 3rd one on the cutting room floor. Like, if you watch the behind the scenes, they literally just cut that scene, I guess, because they needed more stuff in Canto Bight. So 100% Remso, 100% agree with that take.
Yeah, I just I didn't realize. So I tweeted this a bit ago as I was rewatching The Last Jedi, and I didn't realize that this tweet, because I muted it, seems to be popping off a little bit. But yeah, like this is one of the things that people go back to, is that the Last Jedi hurt, and I think for a couple of years I've been a little insensitive to this fact, and I think I get it now. Like, I understand why people in this dark as hell time in the world, particularly in this freaking country, wanted to go back to Star Wars and be with their heroes and be lifted up and pushed forward and see the best in who they were in their childhood and the people they looked up to. And Disney was like, how about the worst? And that says something about what we think about Hollywood, what we think about the people who make these movies, that they hate us. Therefore, they want to drag down the heroes. But it's just like, this scene is what people get upset about. And it's we don't know what happened.
It's what Kylo told Rey happened.
There's 3 narratives, or there's 3 versions of the story told. First, Luke tells like a straight up like lie. Like, he tells like no version of the story. Just, I went to confront Kylo Ren, it went badly, and then he turned on everybody and killed them. Then we get Kylo's story. And Kylo's story is Luke was rabid, seething at the mouth. And they're like, in the entire telling of the story, Luke has wild eyes. He's frothing, he's angry, and he swings at him, and all this stuff. And he just looks evil and crazed. And then later, Luke tells his version of the story, and Luke is disturbed. He's reading his mind, and he takes out his lightsaber. He looks at it conflictedly, and then he kind of like goes like, ah! And then he turns it off, right? And then he doesn't do it. And Kylo Ren goes for his lightsaber, and it all falls apart. But we talk about this as if like Disney and Rian Johnson made Luke into a killer who is going to kill his nephew, and that therefore means that Luke Skywalker is awful and not a hero. This kid is a freaking monster. And he looked into his future, read his mind, and saw, again, all Skywalkers see shit that doesn't happen. Like that's part of what Star Wars is about. Skywalker's look into the future. Yoda and the likes always warn them, don't do that. It's not real. And then, you know, they are tempted nevertheless to take action. And Luke does it again. He looks into the future, tries to read the tea leaves, and he's like, this kid's going to kill so many people. Why would you not do that? Why would you not think for a second, I need to kill this kid? I don't understand that. I don't think it's a denigration of Luke's character for him to have a moment. And Luke says, I think the quote is, and the thought passed like a fleeting shadow.
For the briefest of moments.
For the briefest of moments, it passed like a fleeting shadow. Yeah, no shit. Like I have lots of bad ideas every day that pass like fleeting shadows. This one is obviously particularly murderous and egregious, but this is Star Wars.
Look at you defending The Last Jedi and Mr.
Well, he's also
Stephen
doing.
King.
Johnson's also doing a Rashomon thing there, which is cool. That you know he's it's you know, if anyone listening, it's an Akira Kurosawa film, who was a big influence on Lucas for the original Star Wars films. But he has a movie called Rashomon where there's some sort of murder mystery or something involved with samurai, and there's something similar to this where you get 3 different recountings of the same event, and it's shown in flashback each time, but subtly different. And I don't know. I think it's really cool that Johnson would look back not just to the prequel or the original trilogy as an influence, but also to the influences on the original trilogy.
Well, you know, originally Grayson, the Ryan Johnson posted like, this is my Star Wars movie style book, and he had his sort of list of movies, including Akira Kurosawa and a few others of like, this is the type of movie. I remember reading that list like, oh, this is gonna be awesome. But that's where he becomes the sort of auteur that breaks the rules of Star Wars. And now, all right, Steven, get ready. I'm gonna jump on the other side for a second.
You can't break the rules.
Here's the problem with Ryan Johnson's execution is that this is the great example of 3 different flashbacks. Star Wars doesn't do flashbacks. So there's never been a flashback in a Star Wars series. Maybe a flash forward, a vision, but it is legitimately confusing to the audience, and I think dilutes the potential for Luke's character arc, like we kind of talked about.
Well, and so he said in Star Wars. Sorry, I don't want to ramble on anymore. I just my friend Sean, and if you're watching, Sean, I'm not talking shit about you. Just like my friend Sean, filmmaker, and you know, he goes, you know, like, how do you know that Luke didn't do this? I said, I don't know. You have 3 accounts or 2 accounts, and never are 2 accounts ever perfectly true. Like, this is common sense. We know this. But we know not to trust the account of a kid like hyped up on the dark side. The dark side is all about ego, all about emotion, all about self-importance and glorification. And he's like a freaking child. So of course he saw Luke the monster standing above him, afraid of his power. Like, I think what you're saying is right. What I'm trying to say is that having multiple narratives in Star Wars just like it sets us on each other, like for the fans to tear each other apart. And if I would go back and redo that, I would not do that. I don't think headcanon and theorizing like this is good for Star Wars. We should, I think, have clear facts, clear religious lore.
What's wild is in the Kylo Ren limited series that came out about a year after The Last Jedi. It was supposed to come out around the same time of it. It didn't come out till way later. After the scene in which, you know, Luke is about to, you know, slice him in half and stuff, he kills like 5 of his friends in like, you know, the first couple hours of running away to Snoke. So sometimes I watch this, I just wonder, like, you know, did they have an intention? Like, you know, Disney Marvel editorial on the comics is always very good, but then when they try and tie it into the actual canon of the sequel films, it's moments like that where it's like they tried to put that out there to then justify everything that Luke was going to see. But then I see that and I'm like, but it doesn't feel like this was intended. That's the thing. Yeah. Like this is the one movie that I'll say, like, you know, I keep joking about, you know, Rose Tico and stuff like that. This was all over the place. And I've seen, you know, Rian Johnson's movies. I like Knives Out 1 and 2. and those are very cohesive, even though they're told in you know, a non-linear way sometimes, and he loves the use of flashbacks and stuff, especially for like whole acts. This felt pieced together in so many ways. That's why I asked Riley. It's like, you know, I never considered if you just focused on the Luke arc alone, even take out the stuff with Poe arguing with, you know, purple hair chick, like you might actually have something
That's
that like,
Admiral Holdo.
yeah,
Show some
whatever her
respect.
name is, whatever her name is, she
Show
was
some
diversity
respect.
higher in the Air Force. I could actually see it being interesting.
Oh, sure, 100%.
Riley,
And
is the reason you hate it flashbacks? The SSW network would like to know in the comments. Flashbacks? The reason you don't like it? Really? Is that what you said, Riley? That's why
exactly
you
what I
don't
said,
like
and I
it?
stand by it. No. I think, I mean, it's just fair to say that, like, my broader point, I think, and the important thing to recognize is the execution problems and what deprived a better execution of Luke's arc, like Remso is saying. I think there is enormous opportunity there. I think I love like this the dialogue between Yoda and Luke, where he, you know, we're talking about the doctrinal view of the Jedi, the idea that, hey, maybe being a Jedi is more than the sacred text. That's a really good idea, but again, it's sort of a vacuum brief moment that is distracted by all of the crap.
It is weird that in the Disney era of Star Wars, like flashbacks are now becoming more and more utilized. Like
sure.
since the Last Jedi, I'm trying to think of the couple. I know there's an Obi-Wan Kenobi is highly flashback driven.
Ahmed Best rescuing Grogu in The Mandalorian most recently.
Mandalorian, yeah, like flashbacks just weren't employed before, and now they are. And this is like, I don't like doing like film review and like debating like what makes a good movie, but in Star Wars, like I don't think flashbacks are like part of the aesthetic, like the vibe, but that's just because there are 6 movies prior that don't do flashbacks. It's lazy to me, but you know, the idea that like that we need to know exactly what happened in that story. My friend Sean called it lazy writing, called the flashbacks and the multiple accounts lazy writing. Well, it's not lazy writing if the purpose of the multiple accounts is to create confusion. That's the point. But again, I wish confusion were not what we were going for here. Clear cut is sometimes good. We've been going longer than I planned, so I want to let anybody go who has to go. Grayson, do you have to escape?
I do not. I was going to say, do we want to? I had another thought about just Jedi religion, but then I was going to say, do we want to talk about the throne room scene?
Yeah,
because that's kind of, you know, we talked about the big lightsaber duel in the last one. I thought we should do this one too, right?
Yes. Yeah. Because that is the lightsaber fight of this movie. I mean, the confrontation at the end is a interesting Star Wars head fake for a duel, but yeah.
Well, head fake's a good term. Like that's one thing that I thought was interesting and was refreshing to me about this movie after seeing The Force Awakens, is The Force Awakens was just so much, you know, warmed over A New Hope and just kind of feeding you back the same stuff with small changes.
Yeah.
Whereas this, I really felt like he was kind of playing with your expectations a little bit in a way that J.J. Abrams wasn't.
JJ doesn't know how to do that.
Yeah, JJ's not on that level. But you know, even just the throne room scene of having the lightsaber on the arm of the throne, and you know, it really surprised me when he turned the lightsaber on Snoke. I thought that was a very cool switch up, and I really like this lightsaber fight too. I mean, I know there's the one shot later where the guy has the 2 things and they have to like digitally edit one out of his hand in the middle of a shot because he's like standing there and Rey's, you know, saber locked with one of them, and he could have just stabbed her with the other if they didn't edit it out. And it's just this horribly glaring mistake that they shouldn't have kept in the movie. But other than that, the choreography here is really cool. I love Kylo just like kind of tapping the lightsaber on and off to knock a hole through that guy's head. I thought
They should have taken his shirt off.
Kind of a fun
would have made it better.
Use of a lightsaber that we haven't seen before. Yeah, I don't know. I like this scene. I love the red wall. Like I love the color palette here.
It's cinema.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go the other way on this. I've probably watched too many analysis videos of like the choreography of this battle.
You
And
watched that quarter crew video, didn't you? Breaking
I,
this
I
down. Yeah.
I did. I've watched that and a couple others, and it was an experience where I got to the end of those and I was like, yeah, there's just something about it that I just find odd. And again, it's again like the un-Star Wars-y aspect, but that's again the thing is like, I don't think it's wrong to do something that breaks expectations and goes beyond what you expect from Star Wars. I think you got to do that stuff sometimes. But the problem is when you are constantly undermining expectations while denigrating the past or being perceived to denigrate the past. And then everyone's just like, do you even like Star Wars? Do you even love what Star Wars is about?
I was curious about this too, is that this was something that's been seized on as like the kind of ossified critical discourse around this movie is like, oh, it's denigrating what came before because Kylo Ren's constantly saying like, let go of the past, like it's holding you back and move forward. But like, he is the villain. Like that message is not kind of ultimately endorsed by the film, I don't think.
This is important. So people take too literally sometimes the things said by people you're supposed to hate. when people, I need to like search for a good example because this comes up a lot where there's a character and they act a certain way and you don't like them. And their presence in the movie, people get mad at. Maybe Holdo is like a good example of this. Purple hair lady, the diversity hire. The Holdo in this movie is not a nice person. You're not supposed to like the way that she's acting on board. Poe is our hero since the prior movie. We generally think that he's a nice guy. He actually did well in that battle in the beginning of the movie, though he did learn a little bit of a lesson about, waste of human life and ships. But Holdo is like nasty. And her presence in the movie, people treat like a statement, like an endorsement of her behavior. And I just don't agree with that. I think you're actually supposed to cringe at the way she's acting. And by the end, like she is deposed by like Poe and multiple members of the crew. And then Leia brings it all to a close and stops the feuding. I'm glad you mentioned that though, because like when characters you don't like do stuff, sometimes we react to that as if it's an endorsement. This is our mission. That is our mission. All right. So let's maybe anything else that y'all want to say about The Last Jedi? Because then we got to talk about what's actually the worst Star Wars movie of all time.
Yeah, let me shotgun 3 more beers and then we can talk about Rise of Skywalker.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
My last thought on this is, in terms of like, subverting expectations or changing the formula, I'll tick some people off. I like the J.J. Abrams Star Trek films. I'm much more of a Trekkie than I am a Star Wars guy sometimes. And
you're a communist, is what you're saying.
Essentially, I'm all for the intergalactic New World Order, of course.
Deport.
But like, the last couple of the Next Generation films were just not good. They weren't. So when Abrams came on for Star Trek in 2009 and he was given the task of having to completely reboot it, I think what he did by, making it an alternate timeline with the Kelvinverse and everything, what he basically was establishing was, listen, like you're not going to like everything that comes, but understand that firmly the tone is changed. Everything is changing. And then you get the Fast and the Furious guy in Star Trek Beyond, and no one knows where that went. But like, at least for his Star Trek and at least for the sequel that had Khan in it, like you knew that you were going to get stuff that was very different. So whether you liked it or not, and I didn't like everything about it. I don't like how they made the Klingons ultra weird and stuff like that in the second film.
I don't even know what that is.
You got to go watch some Star Trek, dude. At least there they were setting the standard. To go from Force Awakens to this was so jarring.
Well, I get it. I mean, if they didn't want to do that, they shouldn't have hired Rian Johnson. I mean, I don't blame Rian Johnson for watching The Force Awakens and being like, well, I'm not doing that. Like,
right.
I'm an artist, damn it. Like, I'm gonna do something here.
And so
could have given him like
I want this
Rogue
book.
One or Solo or another movie, though. That's my thing. For at least this arc, I felt like if they had put him in like one of the other like spin-off films,
No, I think you're
maybe that
correct.
could have done it.
Well, he was supposed to have his own spin-off. I think his own spin-off trilogy, right? Before they scaled
Yeah,
back the films.
yeah. Until they're scared of their own shadow at this point. Like Disney is afraid to tell certain stories, and they react and they start putting out stuff in response to criticism. And like, this is not how you make Star Wars. You don't make Star Wars out of fear. You don't make Star Wars out of placation.
I've
You
been
make it
told that fear leads to
because-
anger, and anger
something
leads
like that, and suffering and bullshit. You're supposed to make Star Wars because you have something to say about its virtues and about its values. And so, like, again, I want to see a book written about how what was going on with like J.J. Abrams, Rian Johnson, then like the internal, fear and rumination, and going back to J.J. It boggles the mind how this could happen, how you could make a trilogy where you don't know what's coming next and you don't know the tone and the director that you're going to have. I think it ruins the entire thing. And so let's move on to J.J. Abrams closing out the trilogy with The Rise of Skywalker. I didn't get to rewatch it in anticipation for this, but I did watch it in a hotel a couple of weeks ago, and it numbs the mind. This movie to me is The Last Jedi was divisive. It attempted to say certain things about Star Wars. It attempted to like engage with the material and made some claims about it, denigrated certain aspects of it, elevated different bits of the lore. But then The Rise of Skywalker comes along and they go, we're scared. We don't know what to do. People are mad. People are arguing. Okay, here, sugar, Palpatine, lightsabers, and a giant force lightning that goes into the sky. You like that, right? You're Star Wars fans. You're Star Wars fans. You like force lightning. Here's some. Okay, take it. Like that's what when I watch this movie, that's what I feel. I feel like they're like, Star Wars fans are stupid. Let's give them this.
The thing that struck me the most about this movie when I partially rewatched it is I could summarize the plot of A New Hope or The Empire Strikes Back or even like Revenge of the Sith or Phantom Menace. Clone Wars is a little more convoluted, but like I could not begin to summarize this.
I kind of want, Grayson, to hear you attempt it. I want to
summarize this. Well, I mean, like, I don't know, A New Hope is easy, like farm boy meets mentor, bad empire kills family, they go to try to get to the rebellion. They get captured by the Death Star. They free Princess Leia. They go back. They have to do a mission. They blow up the Death Star. Like you can summarize it. How would you even begin to go about summarizing this film? There's so many.
Healing the wounds of a snake.
We've got to find Exegol. Now we've got to find the Wayfinder. But to find the Wayfinder, we've got to find the dagger. But to find the dagger, we've got to get C-3PO to the droid hacker. And also
unlikable lady almost kills Chewbacca.
And there's Lando Calrissian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like this entire movie is just like it feels like this movie could have been a whole trilogy.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I feel like you almost said fever dream, and like I like that's what I feel when I watch this movie. It's just
like they go to Burning Man early on, and I think I like took something at Burning Man, and that was the rest of the movie.
Probably the thing that's so strange. Oh God, there's so many strange things, but the idea that the Sith have returned to this movie. It's like the Sith faction that they call them that, and they are called the Final Order. Or some weird crap.
The Third Reich was taken.
And even when they were like selling the toys for the red stormtroopers, they're called Sith troopers. And you have characters in the Resistance talking about the Sith as if
who are these people?
As if the Sith are like a known quantity that people talk about. In all of Star Wars, I mean like all of Star Wars, commoners don't talk about the Sith. Like the Sith are these sort of behind the scenes phantom element to what's going on in the galaxy. Most people who lived through the days of the Empire don't know that they were governed by Sith lords.
I always
That's-
joke that Star Wars is like the universe where Alex Jones is just right about everything. That like
Yeah.
the government's run by Satanists. Emperor Palpatine's part of an ancient Satanist cult.
and then yeah,
He puts on a black robe and does chants.
and drinks the blood of younglings.
Nice.
He conceives babies in unsuspecting women's wombs for his nefarious purposes.
Brian Stelter. Brian Stelter made this movie. It's weird. Like they all of a sudden are like, all right, we got this thing called the First Order, y'all. It's like they've won the battle of the Imperial factions. They've destroyed the galaxy. We should really stop these guys. And then all of a sudden they go, no, there is now a Sith army in the galaxy that is like waiting on Exegol, and they're going to be called Sith troopers, and commoners are going to be talking about fighting the Sith, and C-3PO is going to be talking about the Sith. It's just going to be weird as hell.
I don't understand what the need was to raise the stakes at this point. Like the entire Republic gets blown up in the first movie. By the end of the second movie, the entire rebellion is like 30 dudes on the Millennium Falcon versus the entire First Order with all their fleets and planets and armies. And then it's like, no, we got to raise the stakes. This isn't lopsided enough yet. We have to just conjure 5,000. We have to conjure this cult that's apparently large enough to have a construction.
And this is the Marvel
force to build 5,000 Star Destroyers.
And this is the Marvel. This is the Marvel effect. This is like because. So I'm actually a weirdo in that I don't really care for the Avengers and I don't like Thanos as a story. So one thing that I don't like in fiction is I don't like end of world scenarios where like, and again, Star Wars has this, throughout all of its sagas, but like where the stakes of every battle are the end of the world. Mm-hmm. When the stakes get too big, you sometimes lose touch with like the character plots. The growth of individual characters, relationships. And this movie takes already very high stakes and just shoots them like through the moon. Like every aspect of it is Thanos on crack. And I just find myself going like, wait, like who am I supposed to be following in this movie? Like, who am I rooting for? Where's the resistance? What about Hux? I thought Hux was your bad guy.
I'm
like,
the spy.
He's a true believer. He nuked the galaxy. And now he's a spy because he like wants to get one over on Kylo Ren. It's just they undermine themselves in shocking ways. I don't.
I remember. So I was at a press screening at the Rise of Skywalker a few days before the movie came out, and I just remember like normally these things are very muted and quiet and respectful, and like you've got PR people in the room and all the movie journalists taking notes and stuff. And I just remember at the very end of the movie where there was not one, there's like 3 loud guffaws, like verbal guffaws when Rey randomly kisses Kylo Ren suddenly at the end of the movie. And that just perfectly illustrates what you're talking about, Stephen, where there's just like so much out of nowhere. Because again, it's like it's the sandwiching of 2 different movies that had to rewrite or forget about the one in the middle.
The incest kiss from Empire feels so much more appropriate compared to that.
It wasn't like sweaty and hot like this one was. Yeah.
Oh God.
With
Remember when you watched me kill my dad?
Oh God.
Darkness isn't the only thing rising.
Oh God. And it's up on the screen. Look at
Oof. Oh, it's Tumblr.
We're just friends.
It's Tumblr fuel. No, it's like, and it's one of these things about this is like over intellectualizing everything, but like Tumblr has taken over the planet. Like Tumblr itself is dead, but the seeds of Tumblr, the minds that it has rotted and set loose on the world, like the world has been taken over by Tumblrites, and then this is just peak Tumblr,
My wife was really into fan fiction back in the day, and she'll show me like forums that she still gets like notifications from sometimes, where it'll be like hey, I read this really good Twilight fan fiction, but like Bella is like a single mom working at a diner and Edward is like her son's baseball coach. And I'm like, that's just a different story. Like why would you not just like write your own romance novel and give the characters their own names? This bears no resemblance to the story you're making fan fiction of. The thing that what you were saying, Stephen, with stakes was interesting because like on one hand, they feel the need to shoot the stakes through the moon, but on the other hand, it's like there's so much cowardice in the writing of this film, and that's what makes me hate it more than anything. Is that it's like, oh, Rey lost control of her powers and like gave into the darkness and killed Chewbacca, and then not 30 seconds later, it's Chewbacca's still alive, and then it's oh, C-3PO has to. There's this great tragic moment where C-3PO says, like, I want to take one last look at my friends. It's like he's going to tragically give up all his memories of all 8 prior films. He's kind of the only one that's been there and seen all of it. And he's going to give up all of that in order to, like, help these people. And then, 5 minutes later, it's like, oh, he had his memory backed up, so it's okay.
Man, he's like the Toyota Camry of droids, though. He just keeps going.
And then there's like 5 examples of this in the film, though. There's like Poe has his like ex-flame played by what's her name?
Carrie Russell.
Carrie Russell. God,
the Americans, yeah.
And they like want us to care about his girlfriend all of a sudden.
Yeah, they want to say, well, like it's like if you could kill any character, you could kill her. No one cares about her. We don't even see her face.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you have to get this special medallion to get off the planet because the planet's blockaded. And then they flee and they destroy the planet 5 minutes later. But somehow she shows up at the final battle. Like,
yeah,
this movie just has no guts. Like,
And
oh,
you're
we're going to
supposed to
tease
care.
Rey turning dark the entire time.
What was the
Yeah.
little goblin MFer, Babu Frick?
Babu Freak.
I felt like
I
that
would-
was like some of the most like forced product placement ever because they kept trying to put the toys out. And I remember I think they wanted to do a thing with like McFarlane Toys. They're like, do you have a demand for Babu Frick and the other characters that were introduced? And they were just like, no.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Is like Star Wars always, of course, does this, which is like, all right, what are we going to complain about them doing to create action figures today? And so they create Babu Freak. It's the next cute thing. But again, like
You just wanna step on
I
it.
I know this movie made billions, and people act like that makes it a success. But you don't see people carrying around Babu Freak stuff and carrying around action figures associated with the Rise of Skywalker because nobody cared. Maybe they saw it. Maybe they bought a ticket to go watch it. Doesn't mean they cared. There's nothing.
The fact that they put Dark Rey in the trailer.
In the
and
trailer.
Yeah. And then just didn't follow through on this. Like, you could have made an interesting movie about like Kylo Ren being redeemed as Rey falls to the dark side. Like that would have at least been interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it would have been. And
it would have undercut like Rey being a Mary Sue the entire trilogy as well. Like,
and one of the things, so I wrote this article for the Federalist before this movie came out, which was, sorry, I'm sucking on a cough drop here so I don't hack and I wrote this article for the Federalist where I was arguing that I kind of wanted to see Kylo redeemed. And the reason that I wanted to see Kylo redeemed was because it was important to me that Star Wars maintained its commitment to darkness being redeemable, to incredible sin and evil that you can still come back. And it's mostly just because you have the SJW kind of quarter of the fandom who dominates a lot of Twitter discourse, who were driving this discourse about, the problem of redeeming space Nazis. Like, why are we always having these redemption stories? This is Judeo-Christian bullshit. We can't, have space Hitler come back to the light. Like, why are we normalizing this stuff? And I hate that. Like, I really hate that. So in my resistance against that, I'm like, no, that's cancel culture crap. Like, we need to always have Star Wars be about the road back home. And so I wanted Kylo Ren to come back, and he did. Ben Solo is redeemed, but I still don't like it. Like, it's so weird in the way that it all goes down.
It wasn't delivered in the way that Return of the Jedi was at all.
Hey,
I
remember
think
when
that's the expectation that you're looking at. You're looking at it, and in your mind, you're thinking, okay, is it going to hit the paint by the numbers that we see with Luke and Darth Vader when they finally go up to Palpatine? And it doesn't do that. It just kind of like draws a line straight to the end.
hey, remember in this fight scene when he leans forward and puts his lightsaber behind his back and waits for like a solid 5 seconds for someone to swing at him.
The Knights of Ren.
Yeah.
We laugh at the most about the Knights of Ren in this house because they just were this weird plot element that never got followed up on in any way, shape, or form to explain their significance. And again, I have the comics. Okay,
Again,
I have the
good.
Kylo Ren comics, and they're interesting. I'm interested by the Kylo.
They're like
by
the Hell's Angels, though. They're
If I
not
need to
that
read
interesting.
okay, no, if I need to read the comics, you've made a bad film. There's like what made me the moment that I transitioned from not liking this movie to like truly loathing this movie was the very end when they have the black female stormtrooper character who they introduce so she can meet Finn and just like tell him his exact backstory back to him with like the locations changed.
And they still didn't even give him a lover.
And then at the end, she meets Lando, and he's like, "Who are your parents?" And she's like, "Oh, I grew up by the First Order." And he's like, "Let's try to find your mom," and like gives her the weirdest smile in the entire world.
Yeah.
I thought
And
it was like a
I read
sugar
an
daddy
interview
innuendo.
with the screenwriter, and he like in Hollywood Reporter or something, and he was like, "Oh, what you're supposed to take away from that scene is that like the First Order had a secret program to like kidnap the children of the heroes of the Galactic Civil War. So what you're supposed to take away from this is that that's Lando's granddaughter, and that they like kidnapped his daughter, and that's why he like stepped back from being part of the rebellion."
It's a real thing.
And I was like, "What?"
It's a real thing. Yeah.
I thought Lando was just chasing tail.
A
what are
minor
you talking
stroke.
about? How would I infer that?
I just wish I didn't hear that.
Ah.
You're welcome.
Ah.
You're welcome.
Chasing tail.
So nothing about this movie works, from the pacing to the dialogue to the villain Palpatine being back in the end. I will say the one thing that works. The one thing that works in this
is
movie.
the line "They fly now."
They fly now.
Go to hell. Why would you even say that? The one thing that works in this movie is if Kylo Ren is going to come back to the light, he has that moment of quiet out on the ship after he has weirdly been like brought back to life after being stabbed by Rey. And he does replay that moment with his father. I like that scene. It's interesting to me because again, it's a thing that could be read a bunch of different ways. There were people talking about like, wait, Han can't present himself through the Force. Han can't come back like that. That's not his abilities. I don't read it that way at all. I read it as like Kylo Ren is alone by himself, like having a moment, like just sort of like a real surreal moment. And you do see that because Kylo Ren is alone on the ship at the very end. But he's replaying that moment with his father, going back through almost the same conversation, a lot of the same dialogue as in The Force Awakens. And he makes a different choice. And then Han says different things to him. Still hand on the face. I love you, eternal love of the father, the selfless love. I like that. I think this is like one of the scenes that works. He chucks the lightsaber into the sea and he's going to go back home. Everything else is rubbish.
This is the only, and this is where like I'll be the one guy to say a nice thing about this movie. This is the one scene that really does carry from J.J. Abrams' vision in The Force Awakens to The Rise of Skywalker really well, which is that exact mirroring moment where it's and I like Stephen, I like the way you've characterized this when we've talked about it before, which is that Han Solo, his faith in his son is the very thing that prevents Kylo Ren from being able to remain a villain. And that's very applicable to our lives in that, like, when you have someone who loves you and cares about you, it's really hard to be the new Darth Vader. And I think that's a very powerful message. And I think the scene's brilliantly done. I have no idea how much money Harrison Ford made for that 90 seconds of
that is a Googleable thing.
Back.
Millions. No, and Riley, you put that really well because in The Last Jedi, Rey says to him in one of their like Force Skyping sessions that they're having where she's like, he loved you. Why did you hate him? And Kylo says, I didn't hate him. I didn't hate him. And then he follows up with that by saying, you know, he's my greatest weakness. Like, your parents, why are you searching for your parents? They treated you like trash because they're your greatest weakness. Their love for you is your weakness. And for everybody who thinks that these movies were purely malicious and meant to like tear down Western civilization and undermine every great hero that ever came to us in the 70s and 80s, this is one of those pieces of evidence that that's not the case. That Han Solo did die, and it was rather unceremonious, whatever. But it is about the selfless love of a father, the sacrifice of a father for his son, and the fact that a true father loves their son who is wandering in the dark, has done horrible things. And if you never let go of that love and the child knows that you love them, they will not go all the way down that path, or at least there will always be a road back. And I hold on to this as like the redeeming element of a shit show. Because there are certain parts about the sequel trilogy that say to me that they understand generally what these movies are supposed to be about. And this is one of them, but it's hard to remember it sometimes through some of the silliness.
This is fascinating. Like, I'm really interested in this and like reading this alongside the original trilogy, like politically almost, because it makes sense from a political angle with George Lucas, you know, as a member of kind of the hippie generation and coming of age during the Vietnam War, and this idea of like, you know, my father is the authority figure, like, is a monster, but I can like redeem him with love, so that it's the younger generation like redeeming the older one. So it's interesting that that's inverted in this one, is that it's, you know, ultimately Han Solo's love that's redemptive for Kylo Ren. And that's a turn from what was set up in The Last Jedi, where Rey was kind of attempting to be the one to redeem him.
Yeah.
Sort of this, they set up all this like kind of missionary sexual tension.
This comment from DZ3 is curious, because so you're saying like, please don't, you know, ever headcanon stuff in. You mentioned that earlier, and so you're following up by saying that suggesting they made this scene to be some good father-son moment. Well, then what is it? What is it if not a father-son moment that works? How does that headcanon? Please feel free to respond. I don't know what you mean. It's a father who is dead and a son having that moment of remembering that conversation that he had with his dad, playing it back, but doing a different thing. It's sort of some weird like out of body experience that he's having. It's lovely. I mean, maybe this is something that I read into it a lot, because like, again, like reading into it, because I view Harrison Ford like as a father figure in my movie cinematic universe. He looks like my dad. He acts like my dad. And when I see these scenes that he has with Kylo in both The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker, like I feel a personal connection to that. But this was a good father-son moment. That's not headcanon. He says, this is how I see that is how he wished it was different, but it was not reality. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. He does wish it was different, but because he did murder his father, he's now going back through that moment. He wish it was different, but he knows that his dad did that because he loved him. And because he loved him, he's like, screw this. I'm throwing the lightsaber into the sea. He's fixing it. He's reversing course. I don't know.
That would be a good example of when to throw a lightsaber behind you instead of some other named examples.
Can't
I
relate.
want to rewatch Return of the Jedi now.
Get a single mom in here to ruin the children. Calm down, Veritas. Simmer down. All right, guys, we went way longer than planned. Let's do parting shots. Anything that y'all want to say just to wrap up? This has been fun. This has been a good Skytalker. Grayson, the Daily Caller. Anything else you want to say on the sequels?
Well, I've been thinking about the question you posed at the beginning as to whether you would totally erase them or not, and I'm not sure. It's hard to say that because simply as they exist as like cultural artifacts now and as objects of discourse, I think says a lot about the state of our culture in a lot of ways. Ross Douthat had a really interesting point in his book, The Decadent Society, where he said that there's that scene in Back to the Future where he dresses up as Darth Vader in the 1950s to scare his dad. And it's funny because Star Wars hasn't come out yet. Whereas if you made the same movie today with the same generation gap, both of them would have grown up with Star Wars. So I don't know that I'm glad that they exist in their current forms, but on the other hand, I think it's, it's like you accept the love you think you deserve, right? Or I think you get the Star Wars that you deserve in some senses. And maybe we need to grapple with the fact that this is the Star Wars we were going to get. And also kind of ask ourselves in a deep way, like, what would have made us happy? Because that's another thing that I think happens in the discourse around this is a lot of times people describe what they want, and I just can't stop thinking that if you got this, you would hate it.
I think that's the good closing shot for Grayson. Remso?
I'll do mine in 30 seconds. I don't change anything. I think they should have just not gone through with it at all. The sale is horrible. If you're a real person who just wants to go back to just, hero's journey, ass kicking, all that jazz, go watch Rebel Moon. I know that the critics are saying it's the worst thing since the Holocaust, but you know what? It has Zack Snyder on it, and I'll watch any horrible thing he puts out. So that's all I gotta say.
All right.
Hashtag release the Snyder cut of Rebel Moon.
Thank you, Remso. Riley?
I just can't wait for the Ray movie. Yeah, let's go. Bring it
Shut
on.
up. Shut up. You can't come back on the stream if you say these things.
And I'm fired. And he's fired. No, thanks for having me on, gents. Great conversation. I really appreciate it. I'll go back to my favorite word that I think we accomplished tonight, which is some nuance, some discussion on the merits of these films beyond the typical discourse talking point in PC mode that people go into. So I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for inviting me, Steven. It's been good meeting you, gents, and I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, guys, this has been a lot of fun. Thanks, everybody. This has been Skytalker on Bounding into Comics. Big thank you to producer Cider, working diligently behind the scenes, pulling up the memes, the GIFs, the lightsaber fights, the videos, and producing awesome intro and outros for this show. This has been a lot of fun. May the Force be with you all. We'll do this next week, Thursday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. See you then. I have a request that the next one just has to be a montage of Anakin's signature behind the back lightsaber spin.
Oh,
just over and over and over again.
The whole theme. Yep. Sure. You got it.
Skytalker, presented by Bounding into